everyone, and welcome back to another Introduction to Series tutorials with me, ChipNRat. This week, it's all about zoning and how to create different levels on your skyline for city skylines. I do also want to acknowledge that I know I've been gone for a couple months and haven't made a long form video for about 3 months. I do also want to say thank you for over 300 subscribers and 60,000 views total. I think the last time I did an update on that was back when I hit 1,000 views, and I think I had 30 subscribers. So I do want to acknowledge that everyone who's subscribed and watched my videos in the last year. It's been an interesting year, and it's been an interesting couple of years, and I really appreciate everyone who's commented and liked and subscribed and had good conversations and given me good ideas for videos. I really do appreciate it. So and I really do appreciate all of you. So to get on to this video, and creating different skyline levels in your city. Too often I see in Skylines people either going full ploppable modding, I'm going to place down individual buildings all over the place, or they do just high density everything and everything looks like one giant skyscraper. Now, I haven't done the best job here, I think, but I think I've done a decent job here. This is a city I did a while ago back on stream, and a big part of what I was going for here is creating different levels to my skyline. So as you can see on the left side here, I have a beach with kind of small houses and small commercial. And as you get more towards the city center, it gets gradually larger and larger until you have a nice tall city skyline with some of the ploppable buildings there in the background. And you have some residential apartment buildings coming off of it, off to the side, and different things. And as you go out more and more towards the edge of the town, you get more suburban, single family detached housing and parks and whatever else. Some places that I haven't done as good of a job are like here, where I've just got nice tall skyscrapers right next to single family houses. I don't think that's as good of a layout as I've done elsewhere, but sometimes you just gotta screw around and find out what's going on. In City Skylines, you are fairly limited in the base game by what types of buildings and how many zones you can create. And I've laid them all more or less out here, and you can see that some of them are exactly the same as others. They don't look any different, and some of them are vastly different here. So let's go over what we've got. To make it easy on me, I use the district tool to make it obvious which ones are where. I also changed zones very minorly and labeled them as such so that we could see the difference or the lack of difference between all of them. For example, some of them I have high tech and non high tech. So we're going to start off with the office buildings because it's the easiest to discuss the differences. We have the office zoning, and if you just go with the plain office zoning, you end up with buildings that are like this. Some are small, some are relatively tall, a pretty good mix. And, between all of them, from the smallest ones here all the way to the tallest ones that are about this level. If you zone it so that you have band high rises, that's this city planning policy right here, all it does is it prevents these buildings from going on to that third level. So you can see that some of the buildings are taller than the high rise allowed buildings over here. However, there are none that reach this level. So it creates just a little bit of a difference, but a nice smooth transition, in my opinion, from here to here, where you have some small, some tall, and then again, some small and some tall. Just the taller ones are taller, and the small ones are just as small as the other ones. Finally, you have the IT cluster, which is the specialized zone here. Other specialized zones include like tourism, specialization, leisure, or farming and oil and whatever, or self-sufficient building for housing. And kind of the same thing is going on between office and no high-rise office. You have some that are smaller than the tallest ones on the office section, but most of them are going to end up being taller. IT clusters are the absolute tallest zone in the game. There is no zone that is taller than them. The next closest one is going to actually be this residential, self-sufficient residential buildings here without the high-rise ban. So in order from tallest to smallest, you start with IT and then high-rise, self-sufficient residential buildings, and then it goes down from there. Commercial buildings are actually relatively short, and they're the next ones we're going to be talking about here. In commercial, you have a couple different specializations. You have tourism, leisure, and organic and local produce. Now, each of these gets rid of all of the other functions in terms of zoning, by which I mean if you do a high-rise ban on a tourism specialization, you just don't get any, it doesn't make a difference. Um, Same thing with like leisure specialization. If you do high density versus low density, it doesn't make a difference because they're all going to be the same size. That also applies to IT and Office, although Office doesn't have a low density. It does not apply to the high and low density for residential, though, with self sufficient buildings. So, going from tallest to smallest, I've got them laid out again this way. We have commercial tourism, which creates hotels and things of that nature, mostly hotels. And as you can see, they're all mostly pretty tall. In fact, there's very few of them, like these Happy Memories souvenirs, that are shorter than any other commercial building. Um, this one I would put next to your IT clusters or your office buildings with that kind of high rise or city skyline effect if you're going for that. The next tallest one's going to be your commercial high density and either high rises or no high rises. They are basically the same. You can see this size of building is the exact same as this one on this side. However, there are a few buildings that go taller than that in the commercial section. This one, for example, and that one. They do not get any higher than this building from what I've noticed, unless you have different mods. And the no high rise or the high rise band ones don't go any higher than this one. So it creates that little bit of a difference in height, same as the office and the office non high rise, but not nearly as drastic as either of these up to the hotel level. So next up on the list, you have the commercial leisure and commercial organic and local produce. The commercial leisure has mostly short buildings with a few taller ones that match the size of regular low density commercial tallest levels. However, the organic and local produce, they're all these short little buildings. So if you're trying to create a dynamic skyline, you want to kind of go down towards regular low density and organic and local produce type commercial zones. Then you also have the no high rises for commercial, and you can see this makes no difference really compared to the regular commercial. They're basically the exact same. There are no high rise considerations with that. Going on to the next most simple is going to be our industrial areas. These are not the specialized industrial buildings, these are just the industrial zones and regular zones. As you would expect, the oil farm, forest, and ore districts or specialized industrial areas look fairly different from each other, with farm and forest being kind of the closest in terms of similarity, and ore and oil being kind of close, but they're different enough that they create a different look depending on what you're going for, especially forest compared to oil and ore. Regular and Industry 4.0, there really is no difference between the two. There's a few different buildings in the 4.0 that don't show up in the regular, but they all look like standard industrial, smokestack filled buildings of different shapes and sizes. Now, onto residential, and how I've split this up is on the bottom half here, I have high density, and on the upper half here, I have low density. On the right side, I have self-sustainable or green buildings, and on the left side, I have non-green and non-self-sustainable buildings. For the most part, the differences in the residential buildings don't make any difference. So I have residential, residential with high tech. You can see there's no difference between the regular and the high tech buildings. All the high rises are essentially the same. All the buildings are the same. It makes no difference. These are the next tallest ones in the game after commercial tourism, and then green housing, self sustainable housing high rises, and IT is going to be your regular residential high rises. Then you go down the list and you have the high rise band. This one is probably the most significant difference in height with the high rise band. You can see they're about half the size of the tallest ones on the high rises allowed. And I think that creates a nice big effect there, although they are still about the same as these ones and that one, which I guess is actually a level 5. Next up, we have the self-sustainable and self-sustainable high-tech, which again makes no difference. But I put them there just to make sure because I was running a test and I didn't know whether or not they made a difference. And you can see these are really tall buildings. They're as tall or taller than those, and they're just a little bit lower than those. And if you go into the no high rise area, which starts at this level of building right here, this is as tall as they get. The high rise, as I pointed out before, all it does is it prevents them from upgrading to that last level. So if we were to get rid of the high rise band, they would immediately jump up to level 5 there, and they would probably upgrade to one of these or one of these. There's only a few buildings that are taller than these level 4 ones and the high rise allowed ones in the level 5s, but they are pretty significantly taller. If we turn this way, you can see that the high rise allowed in the non self sustainable buildings, there's a bit of a hill here, so they are smaller than these ones, but they are still significantly taller than these. So if you want to create an interesting and dynamic skyline, you can kind of mix and match your green and non-green buildings and make them slope down or slope up and down a little bit more differently. In terms of the low residential housing, this is pretty much what they look like for the green or self-sustainable houses. And this is what they look like for the non-self-sustainable housing. See, these are high density, so please ignore those. Um, but the highest density they get is about like this, or a 3-level house about like that. The tallest ones of the self-sustainable housing are shorter than the tallest ones of the non-self-sustainable, and they do have kind of the xeriscape lawn look, and a bit of a brown a brown feel to them, less trees and stuff like that. So I like using these for kind of beach housing, and then I put a couple palm trees in there. By combining all the different zoning, you can create a lot of different waves and feels to your skyline that gives it a much more organic feel to it, a much more realistic feel, even if you're not using ploppable buildings or specialized assets or anything like that. Now, for how to zone to create these different looks for residential, I'll just use residential as my example because it's got the most differences. You, of course, have low density here and high density here, which creates the biggest difference in height. But then, to create a little bit more difference, you can mix in the self-sufficient and the non self-sufficient or no specialization buildings, and that'll create the difference from here to here that you see with the brown lawns and the solar panels and everything else. And then finally, you can add a couple of these policies like the high-rise ban. That's the only one that makes a real difference on your residential buildings. And the biggest thing that it does is it just prevents that 5th level from getting upgraded to right there. So you can see this is still level 4, even though it has more than enough to upgrade to level 5. And of course, you can do the high-rise ban on any of the residential districts and only on regular or high density commercial or on regular office buildings. It does not work on IT, and it doesn't work on tourism or organic and local produce or leisure. It also doesn't make a difference with any of the industrial areas because they don't go into high-rise territory. Well, that is it for today's introduction to video tutorial all about different zoning and how to create a more organic and dynamic skyline in your city's skyline city. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next video. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you do, Alfredo here says you should subscribe, or maybe check out this video that YouTube recommends. Well, go on. Why don't you do it?